Treplyov's amour-propre, his self-love, is touched to the quick. He can't stand it anymore. Furiously, he yells, he rushes to the stage and yells, "Strike the curtain! Strike the curtain! I see to it you people are new people are not allowed to be in the theater. The only people allowed to be in the theater are those who slavishly follow the desires of old hacks like my mother." He rushes off in a fury. Of course, the mother is somewhat abashed that she's caused this kind of reaction in her son. But at the same time, she feels totally justified in her reaction. She says, nobody could understand what he was trying to do there. Dr. Dorn, a medical man who's visiting the mother's estate, has a somewhat different reaction, with some sympathy for both Treplyov and his mother. After he sees the performance and Treplyov's stormy outbursts, he says, there is something in this play. Of course, it's crude and not yet well worked out, but there's something in this play that has power. You understand that what I've just described is a play that exists within Chekhov's play, The Seagull. The opening of The Seagull, right before we get into the play within a play, that is a presentation of Treplyov's work that I've just described, contains very typically Chekhovian language. It's a dialogue between a poor school teacher and the daughter of an estate manager. She's dressed in black to indicate mourning for her life, and he claims not to be mourning his fate, which seems bitter enough, 23 rubles a month to support a large family, and a desperate love for her that she nevertheless rejects. The high-flown artistic aspirations of Treplyov and the mundane concerns of these two seem widely disconnected, yet the art of Chekhov brings them together in a very special way. Of course, Treplyov's high hopes and ambitions are far removed from the mundane desires of the underpaid teacher and the estate manager's daughters. Yet the frustrations which they'll meet, Treplyov's play will be a miserable flop. Nina, the young actress, will seek union with another writer. The poor schoolteacher will fall into a loveless marriage with a woman who continues to mourn for her life and nurse a secret love for Dr. Dorn. They'll put them all in the same Chekhovian universe of people who often walk past each other and must live their lives with great pain and minimum gratification. There's something about an absence of communication in Chekhov's plays that remind us very much of certain aspects of everyday life. It's sometimes very hard for us to get across our feelings, our ideas, our experiences to other people, because after all, other people's feelings, ideas, and experiences are very different from ours. In the effort to make ourselves mutually understood, often we meet great obstacles which are movingly and beautifully presented by Chekhov in his play. Chekhov calls his play a comedy. Given the high level of frustration and pain I've just described and experienced by the characters, it's often hard for the readers to understand why. Certainly Stanislavski, the famous director, did not stage the play in a comic way. We have many statements from Chekhov himself complaining that Stanislavski completely misunderstood the author's intent. I suspect that Chekhov's notion of the comic is connected with his view as a medical observer who has to remain at some emotional distance in order to understand the ailments of his patient. When one looks at human beings from this vantage point, they can seem comic and more than a little bit absurd, as if we're viewing from Olympus and saying in Shakespeare's words, "Oh, what fools these mortals be." This is very close to the view of Dr. Dorn, the character who nevertheless saw something very powerful in Treplyov's play. We see the theater from a very different point of view when we see the older generation in The Seagull. Madame Arkadievna, an actress with a wide reputation as the mother of Treplyov, her affections are bound up with another writer, Trigorin, who expresses a wonderful feeling about writing. He says, "I write, and I write, and I write. Wherever I go, I see material for writing that I can't keep myself from writing about. And what's the upshot?" They say, "Well, Trigorin, a dear writer, a fine writer, but not Turgenev." This is doubly ironic when you stop to think of today, when people often say, "Turgenev, a dear writer, a fine writer, but not Tolstoy or Dostoevsky." It's odd how these things turn in the history of literature. Arkadievna's reactions remain constant throughout this part of the play. She sees no sense in what her son's been doing. She refuses to give him any kind of encouragement, in spite of the fact there are intervals in the play where she does show him some love, but they don't last long. Her emotions are all wrapped up in Trigorin. He's not going to give her son anything that he needs or requires from her. To make matters even worse, Nina, the young actress, has thrown herself at the feet of Trigorin. She tells him to use her in any way he likes, and boy, does he ever take advantage of this. He uses her and then spits her out like a used-up orange. When Treplyov hears about this, he's quite upset, and he begins to think about his own writing and realizes that he made a mistake in the way he's thought about it. It's not so much a matter of forms. It's not whether you're a revolutionary in the theater or going through the old traditions, whether you're a symbolist or not. The important thing is to express emotion as it is genuinely and truly felt. And it's clear this is close to the way that Chekhov feels. While Treplyov has realized this, Nina comes back, and this time she visits him. As she visits him, she's in a state very close to that of insanity after what she's gone through. She compares herself, she says, to that magnificent seagull which you once shot and put at my feet. Now I am that seagull. The seagull has obviously become the symbol of destroyed lives. The way a hunter destroys the life of an animal, the hunter seeks to shoot. Nina clearly feels her life parallels the situation of the beautiful bird that was slain. She no longer has any warm feelings for Treplyov. She runs out, and both he and we realize she'll never come back. At that point, the scene shifts to the room next door where people are playing cards. As they're playing, they suddenly hear a pop or an explosion. Dr. Dorn goes into the next room to examine it and comes back and says, "Oh, don't worry, it's all right, it's nothing. Nothing but the explosion in one of my bottles of medicine." Then he says to the other characters, "Look, get Arkadian out of the way so she can't hear. Treplyov has just committed suicide. He shot himself." Just as Treplyov killed that seagull for the good of Nina, he kills himself because he feels he can no longer make a contribution to art. How one can interpret this as a comedy, I must admit that I'm not quite sure myself. But it's a very moving play, and a play that goes into so many different aspects of human psychology and experience is very difficult for actors to do well. But once done well, it's an extraordinarily moving play. Now Chekhov, although he's very popular in this part of the world as a playwright, was not only a playwright, he was also the writer of a series of prose stories, some of which are very moving. Furthermore, his stories don't seem to exhibit what we normally tend to think of as characteristic of Russian stories. They're short. They're brief. They make their point in a very short amount of time. We're not talking about long novels that go on for hundreds of pages. Some stories are only 3 or 4 pages, but what Chekhov manages to get across is something very powerful. A good example of Chekhov's art in this way, although a slightly longer story, is a story whose title is usually translated as The Darling. In Russian, the title is Dushechka, which literally means little soul. This is a good example of Russian diminutives. The word for soul is dusha. This is Dushechka, dear little soul, is often used as a term of endearment, like darling or sweetheart in English. Readers have taken it to refer to the famous Greek legend around Psyche, whose name is the Greek word for soul. This tale has often been interpreted, that is Chekhov's tale, has often been interpreted as a representation of the dangers in combining the force of eros with the force of the soul. In Chekhov's tale, a lady named Olga is first presented as the wife of a theater manager who is eternally nervous about getting sufficient audiences to support his enterprise. He's always yelling, "Strashly ubытki, horrible losses, horrible financial losses." Her every thought is devoted to the theater, and her kindness and sweetness causes everyone to call her Dushechka. The theater manager is terribly upset. People won't come to his play. He did Faust inside out, whatever that means, by the way. But no matter what he does, people won't come. He's experiencing strashny ubытki, terrible losses. Alas, he dies. Of course, when he dies, Olga is no longer attached to the theater, and nobody calls her Dushechka anymore. But soon enough, she's courted by a lumber merchant who then marries her. And now she says, "So what's so good about that theater anyway? It's just a bunch of senseless vaudeville. The only important things in the world are the details connected with the manufacture and sale of lumber." She knows how to say plywood and oakwood and all the technical things that go together with lumber. And she can't imagine a time when she was connected with that superficial thing called theater. And everyone calls her Dushechka. They come to her place to have baranki. I like to say they're Russian form of bagels, but my Russian friends say they're not. And bublichki, and all the wonderful things that are connected with a boiling samovar and a good hot cup of tea. Well, alas, the lumber merchant also dies. And again, nobody calls her Dushechka. There's a wonderful little intermezzo in the story where she sits, and because she's not connected with anybody, she has no opinions whatsoever. And what a terrible thing it is not to have any opinions at all about anything in this world. And the reader is almost lulled, perhaps to sleep by this. But now, lo and behold, a veterinarian comes to her. Soon she takes up with the veterinarian, and soon she's talking about diseases of animals and their problems and what she'd have to do to keep the cattle and pets alive and how very good veterinarians are for the animal world and the human world. And again, everybody calls her Dushechka. The veterinarian is no fool. He knows that the two previous men that had been connected to this woman have died. There's something about her that seems to bring on death. So he leaves, and she loses all interest in life. No opinion whatsoever. And one can again understand how painful it is, and no one calls her Dushechka. But happily, the veterinarian returns, this time with his wife and child. He had taken up with her before, but obviously not married her. She rejoices, puts him up in a wing of her house, and takes over the care of the child with all its attendant worries and problems. And once more, people call her Dushechka. At the end of the story, the child goes off to school. She follows me. He says, "Look, Auntie, don't follow me. I want to go on my own." He comes home, and the two of them worry over his homework. Oh, my God, what is an island? An island is a body of land completely surrounded by water. How difficult it is to learn. How hard they are on the young people. Oh, these poor young people, she says, they have such hard things to learn. She reverberates to every feeling of the young child. As a matter of fact, at the end of the story, he's a real kid. We hear the stirring. He says, "Get out of my way." He's stirring in his sleep. He's dreaming. "Get out of my way. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to get into a fight. Watch out, watch out." She sits there just praying and exulting in the fact she's once more connected with a human being. By the way, Tolstoy did not like Chekhov's plays very much. And he would tell him, he would talk to Chekhov, whose name and patronymic was Anton Pavlovich. He said, Anton Pavlovich, I love you very much. You're a wonderful man, and I love your stories. But your plays, they're impossibly bad. They're worse than Shakespeare's. Tolstoy couldn't stand Shakespeare. Maybe it was out of professional jealousy, but then again, maybe he felt there was too much violence. In any case, this same Tolstoy interpreted the story I've just told you about as a retelling of the biblical tale of Balaam, the priest of a people who stood in the way of the people of Israel on its journey out of Egypt toward the Promised Land. These people, that is, who were meeting the people of Israel, were getting rather nervous about meeting them because rumors have been going around that they've been conquering people here, they've been conquering people there. The people of Israel seem to have some extraordinary force on their side. Of course, the Israelites claimed it was God. So in order to neutralize this force, Balaam, the prophet of the people, was ordered to go out and pronounce a curse on the people of Israel. He went out on his donkey. As a matter of fact, the donkey had sense enough to try and stop him, but he beat the donkey, so the donkey, in order to avoid the beating, went ahead. Balaam came out to proclaim a curse. He opened his mouth, and instead of a curse, out came a blessing. What the devil's going on? I meant to curse, and a blessing came out of my mouth? He went back. He reinforced himself. Again he went out on the donkey. Again the donkey didn't want to go out, and again he beat the donkey. And again he tried to pronounce a curse, and out came a blessing. He did it a third time, and again he tried to curse, and out came a blessing. Finally he understood, and this is biblical language, it was impossible to curse those whom the Lord God had blessed. Tolstoy said that Chekhov in the story was like Balaam. He had intended to make Olga Dushechka, a comic character with her light-minded adoption of different professions. But the result was only a demonstration of the power of love. She became Dushechka, that is, a living soul, only when she was deeply in love with another person. And the power of that all-giving love was the highest mark of humanity. In short, as Tolstoy points out, and of course as the Bible implies, true love is blind. It gives itself to those whose feelings arouse our feelings and to whose love we respond with our love.